Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is great on this Monday morning. Morning? Oh, wow, that started well. On this Monday evening. And I am here to answer questions. And why is it so cold again now? Oh, people still asking me about Tim Spector. I will not give it any more thought. Okay, here's a cracking one to get going with. Right, steps on the Fitbit versus the Apple Watch, they seem to vary a lot. Does it matter? No. But what does matter, so these things aren't accurate, but what does matter is that they are consistently inaccurate, right? So stick to a Fitbit or stick to an Apple Watch, or I just use my phone, right? Knowing that it will not be the exact number of steps that I took today, but also knowing that that does not matter. So as long as you are consistent with the measurement that you're using, let's say it's 2,000 steps, that'd be quite a lot. Let's say it's 200 steps off. As long as you're 200 steps off every day, it doesn't really matter. Like it's more about the consistency and accountability that it gives you rather than the exact number of steps that you've taken. So don't worry about that. What I would certainly suggest not doing is having the calories counted. The reason that it doesn't matter that steps are not accurate is because they are consistently inaccurate, right? So it's always going to be about the same percentage off per day. The reason you can't use calories is because they are inconsistently inaccurate, right? So I wouldn't look at it at all. Um, Vegas Queens 76, welcome. I've had a bad 2 days. I've ordered your VJ book. You'll be sorted then. You'll be absolutely fine. Also, point, don't let a bad few days turn into a bad week or a bad couple more days. This is something I was thinking about today because I was writing something for Commit to Six. And one of the things that we do that's a little bit different than other coaching programs is we have daily accountability. So you can check in every single day. And this isn't a big elongated check-in, it's just basically like, did you hit your targets? But if you didn't, if you're having a bad day, let us know so that we can get you back on track. And this is the difference between, oh, I overate my calories on Wednesday, so I just continue to overeat for the rest of the week, which does impact your results significantly. And I went over my calories on Wednesday. Let's have a little bit of a chat with the coach, some reassurance, and get you back on track so that on Thursday you hit your targets. Like, what can we learn from what happened on Wednesday? Is it, hey, actually, I didn't prepare particularly well, I didn't eat enough during the day, and then when I got home, I was really hungry, I had no food in that actually fit my goals, and I ended up just overeating on whatever, right? And then tomorrow we could be like, how could we prepare better so that doesn't happen again? Can you make sure that you eat more during the day? Can you make sure that when you do get home, if you are hungry when you get home, because sometimes that's inevitable, right? It could be that you work a busy job. It could be that you work a busy, important job, like being a nurse or something, where you can't just choose when you have breaks. And then you will get home hungry. But can you make sure that when you do get home hungry, there is a good option there that is the easiest option for you to go for, and then you are much more likely to take that option. Is squash okay to drink? As I find I drink a lot less water, as a lot less when just plain water. Yes, absolutely fine. I exercise with some weights at home, but I get to a level where I need to go to the gym. Sorry, but I get to a level where I need to go to the gym to take it to the next level, but don't feel confident using weights in the gym where people are watching. You will. The thing is, when something is new, nobody feels confident doing it. Like, I didn't feel confident going into the gym the first time because I don't know what I'm doing, right? The first time you do anything, you will probably not be confident doing it. But I can guarantee you that after you've been to the gym twice, 3 times, you'll start to build that confidence. And then if you are lacking confidence, one of two things. One, get a gym induction, and anything that you're particularly worried about, note it down before. If you're like, oh, that machine over there, I've never known how to use it, or I'm a little bit worried about the weights area. Okay, when you have your gym induction, say that. I'm a little bit worried about the weights area, but I'd really like to use the weights. Can you show me the weights area? Like, can we even just do a couple of sets so that you feel a little bit more comfortable there? Or if you have a friend who goes to the gym as well, go with them. I also saw this meme going around yesterday, or like a tweet thing, and it was such a good point. And I'm not suggesting this because I realise this is actually quite hard to do. And maybe I am partly suggesting it. Anyway, it was like some big famous bodybuilder, and he said, if you're feeling self-conscious in the gym, look for the scariest gym big bodybuilder you can find and ask them for some advice, because they are so passionate about what they do, and they will spend, ages trying to get you into the gym and trying to make it easier for you. And yeah, I actually agree with that from my own experience. Completely true. Like, the biggest, scariest looking people in the gym are actually also the people that love the gym and are so passionate about it that they would spend ages helping you feel comfortable in the gym. And then you will feel that bit more comfortable because you'll be like, oh, at least the big scary man's like giving me the nod when I walk in, and it's like, hey, you're in the weights area. Great. But yeah, oh, I almost blocked someone. Yeah, I think the point of that was go and find a big scary man or woman. And secondly, know that, anything that's new is a little bit overwhelming, is a little bit scary, but the only way to get through it is to start. Fuel porridge pots, 13 to 15 grams of carbs, of which are sugars. Is this a lot? I find it a better option for a convenient, easy snack option. Thank you. Totally fine. As long as it fit. I mean, anything in isolation, you can't really say, right? Like, that sounds fine, but it really is in the context of what you're eating for the rest of the day. So if you go 1,000 calories over, should you try to reduce the next few days? This is a very good question. So I probably wouldn't like that, and it depends on your calorie intake, but that for most people is quite a lot of calories over. And what often happens is you would then, if you're like, right, I still want to get my weekly average calories, because I've been listening to Emma and I know that actually it's the average over the week that matters. But if you say went over by 1,000 calories, you have to try and get that back over the week. You then end up dropping your calories very low, which then the over restriction often turns into overindulgence. And then what you find is you've not created a deficit anyway, and you often fall into this horrible cycle of, hey, I'm trying to get back those 1,000 calories, so I'm over restricting. And then a couple of days later, because of the excessive over restriction, you then overindulge again. And then you're stuck in that same position of, shit, I went over my calories again by 1,000. I need to over restrict now to get back to this average. And then you get into this cycle, and that is not a good cycle to be in. So what's better than that, and this is the bit that people miss, right? People are like, okay, so you either try and restrict to even it out, or you just move on. No. You do something else. What you do is you learn from it before you move on. So what was the situation that happened in? What was like, were you over hungry? Were you over busy? Had you not prepared? Were you emotionally eating? Like, what were you boredom eating? What was going on, so that next time you're in that situation, you have a better solution for it? That's what you need to do if you go over your calories. Or there might be something wrong, like you've set your calories too low, or you're being too over restrictive, or who knows? Okay. Can you please send me the menopause stuff? Yes, DM me after this and I will send you it. That was a lot of messages to get through over the weekend, and I'm quite proud of myself because I messaged every single person that messaged me. So you're welcome, And if anyone is struggling with that stuff, if anyone is struggling with diet and exercise around the menopause, probably the most important time of your life, at the same time as being one of the hardest times, please message me. I'm more than happy to help. What's your best tips to break bad habits? I think it depends what the habit is. And I also think understanding how habits work and how they kind of form this neural connection in your brain, so you're more likely to just do them, right? And I think this is reassuring because the more times you break that habit, i.e. the more times you don't do the habit that you want to avoid, the easier it gets going forward. So like, you're in the habit of doing something, but once you get out of that habit, like, it might feel over the first couple of days that you're trying to break that habit that this is impossible, and if it's always going to be this hard, how would I ever do this forever? But it's not always going to be this hard. Like, the first week will be the hardest. In fact, often the first couple of days, and this is quite variable, right? Some people are like, it takes 30 days to build a habit, or it takes 30 days to break a habit. That is horseshit. Like, it depends what the habit is. Like, if it's a properly ingrained habit, it might take way longer than that. If it's actually quite a small habit that you've only just got into and you kind of don't like it, so you want to change it, it might take 2 days to break that habit. Like, there's no like set period of time. I think people just like to kind of oversimplify concepts like that, but yeah, I don't think that's particularly helpful. But I think what is helpful is if you are struggling over the first couple of days to a week, to remember that it will get easier as you form a new habit. But often replacing that habit with something. So instead of thinking like, okay, I don't want to overeat in the evening, so instead of overeating, I'm just going to sit here and think about overeating and how I really don't want to do that. Instead of that, be like, okay, how can I change the environment that I'm in so it's easier not to do that habit? Like, a great example of this is often you get in the same routine when you're at home. Like, let's say you have dinner, you sit in front of the couch. That's the environment that you'll always end up overeating in. And then you find like you go on holiday or something, and without any effort whatsoever, you change that habit because actually you go out for a meal and you walk to the restaurant. And actually, when you, God, I say actually so much, I'm going to work on that. But actually, when you go out for a meal at a restaurant, there's normally a portion size, right? So you can't significantly overeat. And then you've walked there and you walk back, and it's a lovely, beautiful night, and then you go to bed, right? So you haven't sat at home overeating, but there's also no effort to avoid that habit because your environment has changed. Now, you obviously can't go on holiday forever, but you can change your environment. So instead of just thinking, well, I'll still sit in front of the TV in the same position, in the same situation, and just try and distract myself, think, can I do something else? At least for the first week, can I get busy doing something else? Like, one of my clients always struggled with overeating after dinner. And what they did was, at least for the first couple of weeks, they just went upstairs after dinner. They were like, I once I'm upstairs and distracted, I didn't have to think about it. It was like the sitting downstairs around the food in the kitchen, and it was the fact that I found it hard to stop eating. But once I'd stopped and I'd moved away and I'd found something else to do, it actually wasn't so hard. Hi, Callum. Okay. Not creepy at all, but I very much enjoyed stroking your head today. You know when men get hair, I mean, could be women, I guess, but like semi-shaved hair. It's the best feeling. What's the most affordable program you run? The EC method is the most affordable program that we run. It is group coaching and it is phenomenal, and people get incredible results on it, and I am excessively proud of it. Thoughts on intermittent fasting for fat loss? It works so well for some people. What I would try to avoid is excessive intermittent fasting. So there is quite sensible intermittent fasting, and by that I mean like having periods of time that you don't eat, right? And then there's kind of extreme intermittent fasting or very rigid intermittent fasting, and I don't agree with those. So extreme might be something like doing a 48-hour fast. Like, I don't think that's particularly helpful for most people, especially not for fat loss. If that's like a challenge that you want to do for some other reason, I don't know. Actually, this was quite interesting. I had someone message me this the other day that like, what are your thoughts on 48-hour fast? And I said, why? Like, what do you want from it? And they listed off all these benefits. They were like, I want improved health, I want reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, I want, I actually can't remember them all, right? But all these things. And I was like, yeah, compelling. But you get all of those things from diet and exercise without the massive, like, extreme of fasting for 48 hours. So basically, you don't have to go to that extreme to get those benefits. It can be really useful for people. Again, I probably, depends on the way that you're doing it. Time restricted feeding, which is usually somewhere like you start eating at 11 a.m. and stop at 8 p.m. or something, which stops you kind of snacking either side, works very well for some people. I probably do that without really thinking about it, but it's probably closer to like, no, actually that's not true anymore. Doesn't matter. I think I used to eat in that kind of window of like, I wouldn't have my first meal until like 11, 12, and then I would stop eating after my dinner. I actually eat much earlier now because I train earlier, but I still stop. I think actually probably the biggest benefit you get is the stopping, because most people overeat in the evening. Like, when are you most likely to overeat? People don't have time to like excessively overeat during the day, but in the evening you are most likely to overeat. You've got more time, you're often a little bit bored, and so it's the prime time for like emotional eating, boredom eating, just generally overeating, because often you've made yourself very hungry during the day if you haven't had time to eat, and then you end up overdoing it in the evening. So if you can set yourself a like, hey, and I don't like a time, because again, life gets in the way, and if you're really strict with this, like randomly strict, like, oh no, after 8 p.m. I can't eat anything, and oh look, the train home was late and now it's after 8, so I guess I'll just have to starve until tomorrow morning. Not that you would starve overnight, but I'll just have to go to bed without any dinner. That's silly, right? But if you set yourself a rule of, after I've had my dinner, my last meal of the day, then I don't eat after that. Like, I just wait until the morning, I have a cup of tea, and then that's it for the day. That's a very useful rule. Okay, today my PT told me to take collagen amongst other supplements. Thoughts? Thank you. It depends. For the vast majority of people, not beneficial, very expensive. So I would say no. But it depends. There might be like, there's some evidence for potential benefit with arthritis, or if you have a specific injury. But again, some of that research was actually done. The most compelling research I've done wasn't actually done on collagen. It was done on gelatin, I think. And the protocol was insane. It was like taking it numerous times a day straight after doing certain type stretches for an Achilles injury or something. Like, it was very like mechanistic type work that wouldn't be applicable in the real world. But interesting nonetheless. Going off on tangent, do you watch Happy Valley? Sarah Lancashire's just fab, don't you think? I don't watch anything. I don't have a TV. So no, sorry. What do you think of things like Raheel? I don't know what Raheel is. God, I'm so not down with the kids. Like, I don't know what Raheel is. Don't know whatever the other thing was. Mm, 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 mm. Some of these are quite long, which I will get back to, but what should my macro split be? I answered this briefly, but I thought it was actually quite a good question to go through. And so the other reason I wanted to answer this, because I got another question about like what percentage of protein someone should have. And the problem with using things like percentages is, depending on your calorie target, that percentage might be too low or too high. So it's better to set your protein target based on either a sensible target that I have set you, or, and again, this is where it gets a little bit confusing, grams per kilogram body weight. But if you're very overweight when you start, that would be excessively high amounts of protein, which would be very hard to stick to. So you probably want to go off grams per kilogram of, some people say lean body weight, but again, how do you know what your lean body weight is? But if you just go, and I know people don't like BMI, but it's not that bad. If you go off healthy BMI range, like grams per kilogram of healthy BMI range, probably a good way to set your protein target. I would not be setting it as percentages. Macro split, it literally does not care. It does not care. It literally does not care. The macro split does not care. No, it does not matter if fat loss is your goal. Like, there may be certain situations where I'd look at macro splits, e.g. if you were, I don't know, an endurance type athlete, I might look at a slightly higher carbohydrate split. But even then, there's some people still prefer a slightly higher fat split. And if you're an ultra endurance athlete, some people now claim, and I get you, this would have to be like ultra endurance, but actually having a higher fat intake so that you predispose using fat for fuel as opposed to carbs for fuel might even be beneficial as well. So it really depends, but for fat loss, it does not matter. And we have a ton of research to show that you can lose fat on a high carb diet, on a low carb diet, on a moderate carb diet, on a high fat diet, on a moderate fat diet, and on a low fat diet. There is an essential amount of fat you need. So there are essential fatty acids, so you need an essential amount of fat, and there are essential amino acids, so you need an amount of protein, right, to function. There are no essential carbohydrates because your body can synthesize carbohydrate itself. I would still be consuming carbohydrates just because you don't essentially need them. Doesn't mean that you won't benefit from them massively. And also just enjoy them, which is also fine. But yeah, I wouldn't stress over macro split. Generally what I give people is a protein target, a minimum protein target if you want to have more, fine. A minimum fat target if you want to have more, also fine. And then you can fill up the rest of your calories with really whatever carbs or fats or proteins that you want. So over and above those minimums, it doesn't matter what the split is. The only other kind of caveat I would give to that is that I'd still want you to get in your fruit and veg, enough fiber, a variety of plant-based foods, foods that you know are going to fuel you and make you feel great would be the predominancy of your diet. But if you are already hitting minimum fats and protein targets and getting in your fruit and veg, actually you wouldn't have that many more calories to eat excessive amounts of like junk food. Not that we label food junk food. I would never say that, obviously. Does anyone else feel like we've gone a little bit too PC with that? Of like, now you like foods that we can't say bad foods, but foods that are probably not that good, like not that good. Maybe some people would call them junk food, but I wouldn't call them junk food. They're not that good. Like, they're neutral foods that you maybe wouldn't want to have that much of. Yeah, those. And then it's like, wow, how unrelatable are you now? But anyway, maybe I should just be more articulate, and that's my problem, probably. What would be beneficial for fat loss, boxing classes, or weight sessions? Your diet is going to have a far bigger impact on fat loss than whether you're doing boxing classes or weight sessions. And you could argue this either way. I am willing to bet in the short term, your boxing class will burn more calories per unit time. If you spent 45 minutes in a boxing class versus 45 minutes doing weights, you'd probably burn more calories. But that's looking at something in isolation. I'm also willing to bet it would probably increase your hunger more, which means that might make it harder for you to stick to your diet, or then you might eat back the extra calories that you've burned. Plus, I don't use exercise as, like, there are so many benefits to exercise over and above just how many calories it burns. So I would make sure that you're getting in at least 3 resistance training workouts per week. That's not really for fat loss, it's for health and it's for building muscle. And then if you want to do a boxing class on top of that, great. If you enjoy it, fantastic. If you want to use it as like part of the benefit of that is that it's burning some extra calories, cool. But the vast majority of your results are going to come from what you're doing outside of the gym, not what you're doing inside of the gym. Raheel is superfood powder, like chlorella, to drink. Is there any use in superfood powders? I mean, superfood in itself is a big red flag because there really isn't any superfood. If I was going to say there was one superfood, it would be olive oil. But aside from that, there are no superfoods. So it doesn't, it's not, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Much better to eat the fruit and veg than to drink something like athletic greens or Raheel. How are you even meant to say that? Obviously, this is a one-way conversation, so no one can answer, but... okay, if you can't train due to illness, do you still need to hit protein target? Yes, it's actually even more important to hit your protein target if you can't train due to illness. And that is because you have 2 things that stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Resistance training and your protein intake, right? So if you're taking one of those away, you better make sure that you're at least getting the other one in. So it becomes even more important. Like, when I was recovering from back surgery and I couldn't exercise, I made sure I was hitting my protein. I was like even more like on it with the protein. I upped my protein. I made sure I was getting 4 servings of at least 25 to 30 grams a day. I was really quite strict with that. I'm not quite strict anymore. But that was to minimize the amount of muscle that I would lose. So yes, it's very important, if not even more important. And I know people think, I guess it's kind of like a manifestation of the all or nothing mentality. Oh, well, if I can't train, then there's also no point eating well, and then there's also no point looking after myself at all. And then it turns into a bit of a spiral, when actually, you know, if you take one of the pillars of health away, actually it's even more important to look after the other ones. What splits do you recommend, please? That would depend on less optimum foods. What? Oh, right. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah, hey, there you go. Less optimum foods. That's a good one. What split do I recommend? It depends on how many days a week you can and or want to train. For the vast majority of people, I do a push-pull legs full body split. Even if they are training quite frequently, even if say someone wants to do 6 days a week, I'd probably do push-pull legs, rest, push-pull legs. But also some of this comes down to enjoyment as well. Like at the moment, I train a more bodybuilder split just because I enjoy it. Is it optimal? No, probably not. Probably not at all, but I quite enjoy it at the moment, so that's what I'm doing. Listen to your podcast today. Should I delete that? A dietitian was on it saying when you reduce calories, your metabolism slows down. I found this really frustrating to listen to as anti-diet culture. Oh, right. Sorry. I thought you said mine. I was like, what? What was I meant to delete? Listened to a podcast today. Well, that's the problem. Didn't listen to my podcast. That's where you're going wrong. Anyway, it's called Should I Delete That? A dietitian was on it saying you reduce calories, your metabolism slows down. That's not great. Found it really frustrating to listen to as anti-diet culture. Yeah, it is pretty frustrating hearing that. But that's because you're listening to the wrong podcast, so you really only have yourself to blame. I'm quite wheezy. Okay. If you usually track the scale weight, would you still weigh yourself on holiday? No, you're not going to bring your scales out on holiday. Come on. It's probably like how many holidays you go on a year? Bit different. Like now and again, I'll work with someone who's like, yeah, so I travel like 90% of the time. And I'm like, okay, well, we can't just, every time you travel, we can't just be like, well, that's fine. But if you're like, I go on 2 holidays a year, should you be tracking on holiday? No, just be relatively sensible, get back on track when you get home. If you've had a great time, but you put on 2 pounds of fat, like, who cares? That's absolutely worth it. You have literally all the time in the world when you get home to lose it if you want to lose it. Equally, you can also go away and have a fucking incredible time and not put on weight if you don't want to put on weight. And you make sensible choices. And you do things like the 3-1 method that I spoke about this yesterday and is on Substack now if you want to go and look at that. But yeah, you don't have to, and I certainly wouldn't be weighing myself while on holiday. And then I also wouldn't weigh yourself as soon as you get back, because probably water retention, probably richer foods, probably your weight will have spiked a little bit. So I would get home, I'd get back to your routine for 7 days, and then I'd start weighing in again. Okay, what is your minimum protein and fat goals? Emma's podcasts are the best. Oh, thanks, Sharon. So that would be dependent on the individual and what their goals are. Generally, if we're talking about the average woman, it might be something like 100. Well, I guess I could do this in a different way, which might be more applicable. Maybe something like 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram body weight for protein of your healthy weight range, BMI, and then of the same at least, and I'd probably, for most people, they would do better at closer to 1 gram per kilogram body weight of fat, but the bare minimum 0.5 grams per kilogram body weight fat, and then yeah, then up to you for the rest of it. And also one of the reasons I would never set carb and fat targets is because you also want to be flexible with your diet, right? And people think flexible dieting is hitting macros. It's absolutely not. If anyone's tried to hit exact macros, it is not flexible. You end up eating random foods. Like, I remember when this was such a big thing that everyone would have their macro targets. And there used to be this thing that people would call like a macro box that they'd have at the end of the day, right? And it would basically be a box full of foods that would just be like a fat or a carb. So it'd be like 100% carbs. So if you're like, oh, well, I've got 30 grams of carbs left at the end of the day, but I've got no other macros left, like, you just eat 30 grams of carbs randomly for no reason. Like, it made absolutely no sense. I don't know why we all thought it was like a good idea to do. Or you'd be like, oh yeah, you know, when you've only got like 5 grams of fat and you just need to have like 2.5 almonds. Like, no, ridiculous. Anyway, that's why we don't do that, and that is why it's certainly not flexible. But what is flexible is being like, cool, I'll hit my minimum targets, then I'll be flexible with the rest of it. And the likelihood is you might have one day where you have higher fats and one day where you have lower fats and higher carbs, and that is totally fine. And on that note, I'm gonna go and make some dinner. Thank you for the excellent questions. And I will be back tomorrow, probably at lunchtime, because I have very exciting meetings in the evening. Okay, bye!